My advocate's claim is that the death penalty is an economically inefficient solution to capital crime. The secondary claims are: 1, the total sum of money involved in the legal process of capital crime is higher than that of life in prison. 2, the legal process of the death penalty drains money from other justice programs. And 3, court cases are unable to progress. In the next 5 to 6 minutes, I will show you how my opponent's reasoning and evidence are lacking, and by analyzing them and presenting a counterclaim. First, I will talk about the reasoning and evidence presented in this first point. Second, I will present a counterclaim to a second point. And third, I will talk about the reasoning presented in this third point. I'd like to start off by responding to the advocate's first secondary claim. The total sum of money involved in the legal process of capital crime is higher than that of life in prison. The advocate states that there are endless appeals for death row inmates, when in actuality they're only allowed one appeal. Although the habeas corpus procedure may be petitioned, the same goes for life without prison cases. He also argues that time spent in prison combined with legal procedures, including court, reporter, and clerk fees, come out to be more money than life without parole cases. But life without parole cases do have to deal with the same fees. Dudley Sharp, Death Penalty Resources Director of Justice for All, presented in a presentation titled "Death Penalty and Sentencing Information," wrote, "Many opponents present as fact that the cost of the death penalty is so expensive that we must choose life without parole at a cost of $1 billion for 50 years. Predictably, these pronouncements may be entirely false. JFA, or Justice for All, estimates that life without parole cases cost $1.2 to $3.6 million more than equivalent death penalty cases. There's no question that upfront costs for death penalty cases are significantly higher than equivalent life without parole cases. But there also appears to be no question that over time, equivalent life without parole cases can be much more expensive than death penalty cases." I talked about how the advocate's reasoning and evidence are underwhelming in his first point. Now we'll present a counterclaim to a second point, that the legal process of the death penalty drains money from other justice programs. Although I've already stated that in the long term, life without parole cases can end up costing more than death penalty cases, I'd like to state my counterclaim that the death penalty is a deterrent from crime. Emory University Economics Department Chairman Hashem Desbakdish and Emory Professor Paul Rubin and Joanna Shepard state that our results suggest that capital punishment has a strong deterrent effect. An increase in any of the probabilities, arrest, sentencing, or execution tends to reduce the crime rate. In particular, each execution results, on average, in 18 fewer murders, with a margin of error plus or minus 10. Not only does it deter people from committing crime, but it also saves us millions of dollars per year. The FCC economist Dr. Paul Zimmerman finds, specifically, it is estimated that each state execution deters somewhere between 3 and 25 murders per year. Assuming that the value of human life is approximately $5 million, our estimate implies that society avoids losing approximately $70 million per year on average at the current rate of execution, all else equal. The advocate argues that the death penalty drains money, but actually it can save us millions of dollars. The last thing I would like to talk about is the reasoning provided in the advocate's third secondary claim. Court cases are unable to progress due to death penalty cases. The advocate claims that the appeal procedures can leave cases in perpetual limbo, but the appeal procedure is the same for both life without parole cases and death penalty cases. Edwin H. Sutherland, PhD, late president of the American Sociological Society, and Donald R. Cressy, PhD, late professor of the sociological at the University of California at Santa Barbara, wrote in a revised edition of the book entitled Criminology. It is not cheaper to keep a criminal confined because most of the time he will appeal just as much, causing as many costs as a convict under death sentence. Being alive and having nothing better to do, he will spend his time in prison conceiving of an ever new habeas corpus petition, with being unlimited, in effect cannot be rejected as res judicata. The cost is high. The idea that the court cases are unable to progress due to the death penalty is a little inaccurate because life without parole cases follow the same procedures. In conclusion, the evidence and reasoning presented by the advocate suffers in some cases isn't even true. I've shown this by denying its claim that the death penalty are allowed endless appeals and diminishing the reason that the fees involved in death penalty cases. I presented a counterclaim to the advocate. The advocate's claim that the death penalty drains money, and actually talked about how it could save us money and deter us from crime. And I diminished the reasoning on how the death penalty cases can make court cases unable to progress by showing how life without parole cases can do something.
All right, you state the advocate's points clearly, and then you kind of preview your responses on those individual points, which is not a bad thing to do. We anticipate what's coming as a consequence. As you get to the individual points, you're signposting fine. Basically, you've got a counterclaim on the arguments. Well, you kind of start with a challenge to the reasoning of the advocate on the first point. And you really seem to be suggesting here that the costs are the same. You don't really provide the proof of that until your last argument, and I think that needed to come a little bit earlier. You had a good claim on cost issues when it came to deterrence on the second point. And I like that, where we have some standard by which we can measure those two things. And I thought you had a nice summary on the first point as you got to that second point. On the second point, all of it, your argument is based on counterclaim on the cost savings that occur because of the death penalty. There's not much analysis of what the advocate's argument was on this point or reference to the evidence that they're using. So if we save $70 million in the long run, is that as much as we spend on the death penalty currently, or is it more, and then we're actually getting savings? You need to make that cost comparison for us. And on the third point, it's labeled very clearly. This is the place where you really provide the evidence that shows that the other process is likely to be just as expensive because of the appeals that are going on, and they're going to clog up the appeals process just as substantially. And I like the fact that you had some authoritative information on that point. I thought you cited your own evidence very clearly. You needed to talk a little bit more about the evidence that the advocate used so that we can do some contrast on this. All right, thank you.